Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today we are in the account of Freestyle. This is one of my Patreon subscribers, and I really appreciate him coming to me. He needed help with his clan boss team, and I said, sure, we can do that. That's what we're here for. And if you guys need help with your teams, with your account, whether that's clan boss or dungeons, whatever it is, you can sign up through my Patreon. I do have links down below in the pinned comment and description of this video, as with almost all my videos, and it's also on my website. If you want to find me there under contacts, you can do that too. But yeah, we went in and we're like, he's actually just wanted me to update his team. He's running a double man-eater team. He's just looking to put Turvold into his squad. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. Shouldn't be a big deal. And then, of course, you know, I got in there. I looked around and I was like, I think we can do more than just that. I think we can give you a nice little upgrade on your team. So yeah, that's what I did today. We looked around and I realized we could build the Myth Heir team, which is just one of the best teams out there. I haven't really revisited this comp since I introduced it several months back, but it is an incredibly good team. It can be run on full auto. It works for pretty much every difficulty, you know, Ultra Nightmare, Nightmare, Brutal. It has a rare champion, so you get that little caveat out of the way as far as the quests go, or the missions and all that. And it can pretty easily do a 1-key damage on Ultra Nightmare. Now, that is always dependent on the gear and how you're building your champions out, who you have as your DPS champion, but it has a pretty low threshold of gear that you need to get and put on your champions to get to that 1-key number, especially if you can do, like I was able to do, put toxic gear on Heiress. And so it's pretty easy to get a pretty good result. Now, I haven't even finished running this team, so I might have screwed something up. You guys might get watching me mess it up, but I have built it out. I think it should work just fine. 50 turns, full auto, and get us a 1-key damage. So we're gonna go look at the champions. We're gonna break down the gear and how I geared them out. Always do that. But on top of that, I'm going to talk a little bit because there are some accommodations you need to make when it comes to different affinities based off of the champions we have in this account. So we'll go over that as well, so you have an understanding of if you're running into trouble, maybe some of the things that you need to look out for that can help you out there. But that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and look at the account. Okay, real quick, before we actually look at the champions, I always forget this, but I gotta remind you guys, hit that subscribe, notification bell, and the like button if you enjoy this video. It really does a lot to help support this channel and the work that I do for you guys, and I love bringing this kind of information to you. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and I'll do you a favor and keep putting out these videos for you guys. That's it. Let's go look at the champions. Any Myth team, Myth Heir, Myth Fu, any of them is going to, of course, focus on Demitha. Can't build it without her. She's got on a 3-turn cooldown, a 1-turn block damage buff. And that makes everything work because now we're able to be unkillable for an entire turn, and if we can get her going fast enough, we can do that every single turn, and that's what's happening here. On top of that, she has a buff extension on her A2 ability. These two things in combination make her incredibly versatile and good for us. Now, the way I built mine out is with 3 speed sets here. We've got her going at 275 speed. I tried to build as much damage in as I could, but these are hard speeds to get, and this account does not have great gear. This really doesn't have great gear. I was trying to do like a Myth Fu type of version. We couldn't get to the speeds required. So the Myth Heir is the one, and this is why. You only need one champion this fast, 275. It's a really low threshold for an unkillable team that's going at a 2-1 ratio. I mean, honestly, it's not crazy speeds to get to. And we almost have 100% crit rate on her as well. So these are the masteries we're taking, and we're going down the offensive tree and the defensive tree. And this is what I recommend for basically everyone except for Heiress, and I'll get to that when we get to her. But for Demitha, obviously we're trying to get down to that War Master proc to get the damage. That's where we're getting most of our damage from these champions is going to be. And we do want to take Heart of Glory because we are getting more damage when we have full HP, and because we're blocking the damage, we're always going to be at full HP. So those two make a lot of sense. On top of that, the defensive tree, we don't really need anything in the defensive tree. Nothing in here do we need except for one skill. It's going to be this mastery, Deterrence. And the only reason why we take this is just that little bit extra, that 20% chance to counterattack when the stun happens. And this build, this comp is unique in that a champion is getting stunned every single time and we're cleansing it. So that's just an easy way to get a little bit of extra damage. The next part of a Myth Heir team is the Heir, of course. When I'm talking about Heiress, a rare champion, farmable rare champion, who is just absolutely insane for this composition. Now, I have her in a toxic set and a mix set. Now, the toxic set is really good on Heiress because she has a natural counterattack mechanic in her kit. Her passive ability, she will counterattack every time her allies attack. It's perfect for this build. On top of that, she gives us the increased speed. She has a cleanse ability. She's really nice. Now, we have her going 245 speed. This is what I need. And I try to pack as much damage on as possible, but you can see we didn't even get to 100% crit rate. It's okay. The speeds are the key. I just needed this to work. Most of her damage is actually going to come from the toxic set anyway. As far as masteries go, we have her going down the offensive tree, and this time we have her going down the support tree. Now, you know the offense is the same as we have with Demitha, but the support tree is going to be a little bit different. We're taking Steadfast. This is so that the clan boss won't target her with the stun. Now, obviously, if she's weak affinity, the clan boss will target her, and we will get to that when we talk about affinity here. But one of the things that we want to do, or at least I want to do, is I want to come down here to Sniper, so that she has a better chance of landing those poisons from the toxic, and Master Hexer, so they stay on a little bit longer, trying to maximize her damage. And because we're getting those natural counterattacks, we don't need deterrence. She's going to counterattack every single time. The next really important champion in this build is going to be Deacon Armstrong. Now, Deacon's doing a lot for us in this build. Not only does he have a really nice aura, but he's got a great turn meter boost. And then on top of all that, he's bringing some really important debuffs for us, namely decreased defense. That's what kind of really makes this comp work so nicely. Now, the way I have mine built out, again, trying to maximize the damage, but we're limited with the gear. 100% crit rate. Good accuracy, way more accuracy than we actually need, but it's what I had with the gear involved. And then I have them at 185 speed. There is a little bit of leeway with the speed. It's easier to go up than it is to go down, but all that's like on the website, so you can find that information as needed. As far as masteries go, I'm doing the same thing as I did with Heiress. We're going offensive tree and we're going support tree. Again, we want to try and take Steadfast. I don't really want him taking stunned. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. We could very easily go down the defensive tree, and honestly, that's probably the way I should go. I think I would prefer to get those counterattacks from deterrence than trying to get the sniper and master hexer buffs. But we are a little bit, I was struggling a little bit for accuracy at one point. Definitely was struggling a little bit for speed, so the Lore of Steel was going to be helpful for that. It is definitely arguable which way would be better. I probably would lean down the defensive tree and taking deterrence if I were to make this all over again. But this is going to be a very nice build for us. It's also going to help ensure that we have decreased defense up for the entirety of the fight, and that's a pretty important debuff to have up. Next in the list is Seeker, who is obviously an amazing champion, gives us an increased attack buff on top of that 30% turn meter boost every other turn. Really, really good for us here. Now, with him, I have him at 169 speed. The speeds on Seeker are pretty tight, and they are in direct relation to what I have for my DPS champion and for Heiress. So there is guidance on the website for that. You're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. This is more important for Spirit affinity when you're actually having to deal with that decreased speed debuff than any other affinity. The other ones, there's a lot more leeway, and you can pretty much play in the calculator and find the right speeds that work for you. But as far as making it work for all affinities, it is kind of tight. So you're just definitely going to want to pay attention to those notes on there. We don't need accuracy with him. We just want to stack his attack and his crit damage. So that's what we've done here as much as possible. I do have an amulet here. It's crit damage. I haven't rolled it up yet. When we do that, we'll get even more damage on this build. As far as masteries go for Seeker, I went down offense and defensive tree. Again, nothing crazy here. We're just trying to get as much damage in and on this build as we possibly can. And then finally, we get to the DPS. Now, for this team, I actually built 2 DPS champions. It's because of the affinities. I will go into that in a little bit right after this, but first, let's just talk about the champions I'm using. I'm bringing in Turvold because he's insane. And whenever you have an opportunity to use Turvold, I want to use Turvold if I can, right? So what do we have him at right now? We got him at 157 speed, 264 crit or accuracy, 245 crit damage, 4,800 attack. Clearly, we can definitely build him up even better, but Turvold's going to be a beast regardless of the stats we put on him. That's just how good he is. We only need 70% crit rate because of the crit rate buff he does give himself. But this is going to be a very solid build and should do pretty good damage, I imagine. Now, mastery-wise, we went down the offensive tree and the defensive tree, pretty much identical to the other champions you've seen. No real difference there. Our final DPS is going to be Brachus. Now, we have him built with some perception sets, cruel sets, almost 100% crit rate, not quite there. Pretty good accuracy though, pretty good attack and crit damage. I'm pretty happy with this. 148 speed, very slow for this DPS spot, but he's really good. We are going to need him for affinity though. Now, as far as masteries go, we went down the offensive tree, coming all the way down here to Giant Slayer because of those multi-hit attacks that he gets. And then we also went support tree because if he's in the team, he needs to take the stun, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So we're not going to get any counterattacks from deterrents. We might as well come down the support tree here and try and extend with Master Hexer that weaken debuff that he does place. We can also add some more accuracy so we don't have to build it as much in our kit. So you can see at the bottom here, the two teams that we're going to be bringing in here. Now, I say two teams. It's really one team. The only change here is we're changing our DPS from Turvold to Brachus for Spirit Affinity. That's the only difference that we're going to make here. And the reason why we have to do that is you can see we have multiple affinities in this team. Deacon's green, Seeker's blue, and Heiress is red. And we all know that the clan boss loves to stun the weak affinity champion. So when you have a weak affinity champion and they can't get stunned, we need to bring somebody else in that can be a valid stun target for the clan boss. So generally that's going to mean another champion of that same affinity. This is why we're bringing Brachus in. When we go against Spirit Affinity, we're very vulnerable. Specifically, if Heiress takes that stun, it's going to throw everything off, right? She can't cleanse the stun if she's stunned herself. So we need someone else in there to take that stun. That's why we're bringing Brachus in here. And so this team should work just perfectly because of that. Now, if we were going against any other affinity, right? Whether it's green affinity or whether it's red affinity or blue affinity or void affinity, the stun target is going to end up being whoever's kind of first in the turn order or of weak affinity. This is part of the reason why we've actually sped Turvold up faster than Brachus, because with the Spirit Affinity build, making sure that all the speeds are in the right order, and I really recommend you go check the website so you can see the numbers that you need for that. It's kind of math heavy, but you need to do it if you want to survive every time on Spirit. In order to do that, what happens is we actually sync a little bit later. We actually sync, the team gets into the normal flow, I think on turn 5 or 6. And so what that means is that first stun, our champions are all vulnerable. We don't get the cleanse up in time. So if that first stun goes to our DPS champion, Turvold in this case, that's great. It's not a problem. If it goes to Brachus, not a problem, right? It's just the DPS. We don't need them to stay in sync. But for our champions that are doing things every single turn that we need to be done, like the turn meter boost from Deacon or from Seeker, or the speed buff and cleanse from Heiress, or the block damage from Demitha, well, we need them to stay in sync. And if they take the stun, it delays their skills by one turn and everything goes to poop. So what we have to do then is make sure that either we have somebody that can take the stun. Turvold's not going to do it on affinity, so we could swap out the DPS every single time. Or what we can do is make Turvold a little bit faster and have it so this team syncs up on turn 3. That means after that first stun, Heiress is going to be right there to cleanse it. So as long as Heiress doesn't take the stun, we'll be in good shape. Now, on affinity, that won't be an issue because if it's red affinity, right, it's going to target Seeker. If it's blue affinity, it'll target Deacon. And if it is green affinity, well, we have the Brachus build right there to take that stun. On Void, anybody can take it, and they're all ahead of Heiress in the turn order, and Heiress has Steadfast Mastery, so she's not going to take the stun. We don't have to worry about it. And so that's how we're going to build this team. That's how we make this work, regardless of affinity. Unfortunately, we do have to bring in a DPS for that one spot. That's the only change we really need to make. Now, one other thing, when we come to Spirit Affinity, that change with the Brachus, it has to do with the speeds. You really need to sync them up. If we get just a little bit out of the way, what ends up happening is if one person takes the debuff, the speed debuff, or one person doesn't, it can throw off the actual timing of the build. That's why the speed ranges for that are really tight and kind of math heavy, but I really encourage, go ahead and use it, get your calculator out. It's not that hard to do. And once you do, you'll be perfectly fine on all affinities. Now, as far as the setup for this, we do have to talk about the skill priorities because this is crucial. Now, with somebody like Deacon, we have a 2-turn delay for his turn meter boost. So we can set the AI priority just like I have here, and then we can use this right off auto. Same thing with Demitha. We're actually going to start with her block damage skill, and then we're going to use her buff extension ability, and this can be set up in AI, so it's full auto. Seeker, we're going to start with his A1 and then use his A2. Again, we can set it up in the AI. And Turvold, I have him set up so he uses A3 first, and this is just going to help maximize his damage, right? Any DPS can really slot into this spot. The only champions you need to pay attention to are Ninja and Gintoro. They both have weird turn meter boost effects, so you're going to have to follow the specific guidance for those particular champions. But Turvold can work just like any other DPS at this speed. Because of his increased speed buff, it's not going to really affect things because we have increased speed on everybody this full fight anyway. And that's because of Heiress. And this is the most important thing with the AI's presets. You have to set her increased speed ability. You have to make that a set skill. You absolutely have to. If she has increased speed on herself, she won't use this skill, which will throw the whole build off. So you got to make sure you set the AI for Heiress, you set the AI for Demitha. The rest of it you can manual to get into the sync and they'll use it on auto, but those two specifically you have to set. Absolutely best thing about this comp, click auto and just let it run. You don't have to do anything else. It's just going to work perfectly fine on its own as long as you have those AI presets. It's really, really nice. And you can, as you watch this comp, look for how it works. At the top of every turn, Heiress is going to cleanse and put that increased speed buff up. Demitha is going to extend that increased speed buff so it stays on everybody for the full fight. We're going to get that turn meter boost from both Deacon and Seeker. Deacon's going to give us that decreased defense, and then Turvold's going to come in and hopefully get us that weaken as much as possible. But most importantly, just do bonkers damage. Other places to get damage from are obviously going to be Seeker and are going to be the poisons from Heiress, who's going to get those free counterattacks. Now, we're not going to sit here and watch the full fight. We will skip towards the end and play some fun music so you guys can kind of see how it works towards the end of the fight, but I think you're going to be pretty happy with the results. We'll see how it goes. I don't even know, quite frankly, but this is a very nice, it's probably the easiest one-key team that you can build. It doesn't take crazy gear in order to get to that point, which is fantastic, and the speeds are very reasonable outside of basically Demitha and maybe Heiress, but 245 is not crazy fast either. So it's a really lovely comp. When we get to the end of this though, I will come back and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about substitutions as far as champions go, and far as gear sets go for this. This is the team, this is the run. We'll go ahead and skip towards the end so you can kind of catch some of this and see how it works and, you know, make some bets on what kind of damage you think we're going to get out of this team. 71.9 million. That's a one key team right there, guys. We have so much room to improve. I didn't even roll up Seeker's crit damage amulet, and he still did almost 12 million damage. We got 16.5 from Heiress. That toxic set goes a long way. And as I said, she gets those free counterattacks. It just helps up that damage and land those toxic poisons even more often. 7 million from Deacon, 4 from Demitha, and of course 32 from Turvold. He's pretty ridiculous. Now we did this with Turvold. Definitely you don't need Turvold to do one key damage on this comp. If you looked at some of my other videos, you know that's the case. So there's plenty of champions we can bring in to get this kind of result on Clan Boss. Definitely don't need that. But it's a really fun team. I think it's really remarkable, really good, and works for almost everybody out there. If you can make the speed with Demitha, that's really the bar, and 275 speed honestly is not a crazy number to get to. Maybe not your account right now, but in time it's actually a pretty reasonable number to get to if you only have to gear out one champion at that speed. So let's talk for a minute about substitute champions you can use, gear sets you can use, so that you guys understand exactly what's ahead of you. So for this team, these are the champions I definitely recommend using these champions that we've shown here for this build. But there are some alternatives for you. If you want to use a specific tune, you can't substitute Heiress, you can't substitute Seeker, you can't substitute Deacon Armstrong. For Heiress, the only substitute is to Hanorok. Now, if you go onto my website, check out the speed tunes, go all the way down to Demitha, the very first comp that comes up is that Myth Heir team. And in that, if you click that link, you will see variations on this build using 2 DPS champions that aren't commonly used, or I guess are commonly used, but are a little bit more difficult to tune. I'm talking about Jintoro, and I'm talking about Ninja. You can use both of those champions in this build. You still have to deal with the affinity stuff. That doesn't change, but because of their turn meter manipulations, they become a little trickier. So there are some specific rules for those 2 particular DPS champions. Otherwise, pretty much anybody else you want to use, you can use in this team. You don't have to use Turvold. Now, some of them, if they have an extra turn meter thing, like a Lord Shazar or a Krutraxa, they probably won't work because we do need to keep those buffs up for the full fight. Now, there's other champions like Seeker and Deacon. If you scroll a little further down on my speed tune list, you will see the Myth Heir without Deacon. You'll see the Myth Heir without Seeker. You'll even see the Myth Heir with Mashaled instead of, I think, Heiress in this comp. There are a variety of ways that you can, with Heiress, without Deacon, I think it is. Anyway, there's a variety of ways to do this with other champions, but generally, you're going to need at least 2 boosting champions and Heiress with this kind of team. So it's not super easy to substitute anybody in there. So that's kind of how you do. Now, like I said, if you're trying to figure out Spirit, there are some specific rules and guidances that you're going to need to follow on the website in order to really make that work, because the numbers are pretty tight. The speed for Seeker is really tied to the speed of Heiress, and the speed of the DPS is tied to the speed of Seeker. So you have to be a little bit careful, bust out the calculator. It doesn't take a lot of work, but it does take a little bit just to figure out exactly the speeds that you need. And of course, we're talking about the true speeds, not the displayed speeds in the game. So you're gonna have to factor in speed sets, perception sets, swift parry sets, as well as Lore of Steel. So that's all really important. But that's the build. That's the team. This actually wasn't super hard for me to build. It's not that complicated. Once you know the speeds you need to get to, it's actually really easy, and it works like a charm. That was my first time running it, and we got a 1 key without too much issue. So this is definitely a team I feel like if you can make these speeds, if you can build this, I definitely recommend doing it. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys, something you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like, that notification bell. Whew. Leave a comment down below. I don't know. How's the weather where you're at? Tell me if you're using this team. I would actually like to hear how many people are using the Myth Heir team, because I think it's really good. And if you guys haven't looked at it, you definitely should take that time. But that's all for today, guys. Till next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.